Ready? All right. I'm Rapaport Stereo Podcast is here. Have no fear. I am very, 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 very excited to be with my guest today, Chris Hansen. Did you see that snap technique?
I liked it, Michael. I liked it a lot. It gave me energy.
Now, I'm just telling you right now, you have your own network, you have shows. That snap technique,
That's gold.
It's patent.
It's gold.
So if you steal it, you use it. I'm just telling you right now, lawyers will be knocking down your door,
You're
okay?
going to be hunting me as the predator.
Boom. Chris Hansen, newsman, 10-time Emmy winner. And in a weird way, I was thinking about this, and in a weird way, pop culture phenomenon from your show To Catch a Predator. I appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Now, normally I don't fact check on the I Am Rapaport Stereo Podcast. We pride ourselves on that. But
This story's too good to check out.
Yeah, it's too good to check out. I wanted to get all your stuff out. You have now created a streaming network, an entire network, True Blue Streaming. You have True Crime Nation. You have, which is an update of To Catch a Predator. You have Predators I've Caught with Chris Hansen, which is your podcast, because podcasts are like assholes.
Everybody's got to have one.
Everybody's going to have one, and some people have more than one. And you have a one-man show that you're working on in Las Vegas. You have stuff going on up the wazoo.
It's good. It's a good time to be me, you know, and it's I've got a great team working on all this stuff. And clearly, as you know, crime stories are more popular than ever. And we try to do them in an impactful way, whether it's the new Predator investigations or the many other crime stories, documentaries we're working on, where we take people inside the crime, where they hear things they wouldn't normally hear and see things they wouldn't normally see.
Now, when you got started as a news person?
I started as a reporter in
On air.
radio in college.
Okay.
And then was lucky enough my last year in college at Michigan State to get a job at the NBC station in Lansing. So I was a straight news reporter for many, many years until, well, and I still think the Predator franchise has been news, but clearly, as you mentioned, it's different because it's achieved this iconic stature in pulp culture that I've never experienced before with any other franchise.
Amir, you're going into the singles when he's, right, you're doing it. Okay, even though it's not up here. Okay. You went to college, just real quick, at the same time, a gentleman who did okay in the NBA.
He was pretty good.
Irvin something, Matt.
He had a nickname.
Irving.
Magic. Magic Johnson. Yeah.
You were at
We were
Michigan.
in the same class.
Were you ever physically in a class with him?
I was never in a class with him, but I'd see him around campus. He left after sophomore year to become a millionaire at the Lakers. I stayed and worked $4.70 an hour at WJM Radio, but it all worked out. And I've seen him many times over the years. He's a gracious, lovely human being and
truly charismatic.
Truly charismatic. His whole family is, and he runs his business that way. But he's a lovely guy to be around, and I've had the pleasure of sitting next to him at NC2A tournaments and seeing him at different functions. I stayed pretty active at Michigan State. So, yeah, he's a wonderful, wonderful guy.
Real quick with Magic, what was it like? I mean, there wasn't Twitter, there wasn't everybody taking pictures, but what was it like being in college with somebody who was truly a college star?
Well,
he was a star.
We knew him in high school. I went to Brother Rice High School, and I didn't play basketball. I played football, but my buddies who played basketball played against him in the state championship game, our senior year, I believe it was. And it was tied. And this was before the three-point, shot. And so Kevin Smith, who is a classmate of mine, launches this half-court shot to tie it up and put it into overtime. And Brother Rice, my high school, lost in overtime to Lansing Everett and Irvin Magic Johnson. So
that's a cool story.
It was cool because it was at Jennison Fieldhouse.
Did he stand out as a player? Like, was he obviously he had gotten the nickname in high school.
He did in college. I mean, he was just one of those lovely characters with $1 million smile who just went out there every night and played the game and was a superb team leader. I never heard anybody say anything bad about Magic Johnson in college. And you hear bad things about athletes whose head gets too big or don't remember their roots, but not once. The funniest story I ever remember about Magic in college was he had this beat to hell, Buick Electra 225 in Detroit growing up. We called it a deuce and a quarter. And the guys around town in the gas stations would, do him a solid and tape it up or fix it up or get it. Everybody knew he was going to be just fine, but you got to get him to Genesis from wherever he was living. And gas station attendant, a mechanic, asks him one day when he was talking about going pro, they said, what are you going to do? You going to stay or go? He goes, man, I don't know whether to go for the money or stay for the honey.
Magic said that. That's funny. All right. Because I talking about Magic Johnson and then the segue here, boom, into the Predators.
Sure.
When you're, bring me up to speed, remind everybody how the show To Catch a Predator started and what you were thinking when you first started doing the show. It was originally a segment.
It was a segment on Dateline.
Right.
And I had become aware of an online watchdog group called Perverted Justice. And at the time, its contributors would go online, exist in chat rooms, and if an adult, they would pose as kids.
Right.
And if an adult hit on them and made a date, they would post as much as they had on this guy on their website, pervertedjustice.com. So I started to think, what if we could combine their efforts as decoys and we rented a house and we used our ability to wire it with hidden cameras and microphones? What would happen? It could be pretty compelling. So I pitched the story and they bought it. Dateline bought it. And we set up a home in Bethpage, Long Island. We rented it from a retired NYPD guy. And we didn't have a collaboration with law enforcement at the time. We just did it. I had a security guy, Ron Knight, who was a retired NYPD lieutenant who worked at NBC in security. He was there. And we just did it. So I'm driving to the Sting House, and I'm wondering, I'm daydreaming, getting, through traffic on the Throgsnake Bridge. What if nobody shows up? What if we've just wasted tens of thousands of dollars of the network's money? And with that, my producer, Lynn Keller, calls and says, where the hell are you? Two guys are supposed to be here in 45 minutes. And within 2.5 days, 17 guys surfaced in that investigation, including a New York City firefighter trying to have sex with a child.
Excuse me. 17 people showed up the first day?
In that first sting in 2.5 days.
And what were you thinking the first time you had to encounter one of these people?
I was just trying to keep my heart in my chest, which was in my throat, because again, we had taken the knives out of the kitchen. We had taken security precautions, but you're really operating without a net here. And so the first guy comes in, and I have the transcripts, and the assistant producers try to keep track of all the chat logs on the dining room table in the next room. And I confront the guy, and it goes pretty well. And the guy just leaves, right? Second guy comes in, same thing. Third guy comes in, and I grab the wrong transcripts. So I'm going to go, knuckle down on this guy. And so it says here, you want to do this, that, and the other thing with a 13-year-old girl named Beth. No, it wasn't me. Excuse me. Go back, get the next transcript. A 14-year-old named Suzanne. No, that wasn't me. And finally, in the third transcript,
you're doing like take one, take two, take three.
Yeah. And I got the right transcript on the third time. So he goes, oh, yeah, that's me. Okay, well, let's continue. But it was very unpredictable. We finished, and I thought, oh, my God. Not only have we exposed something that needs to be exposed, we have the opportunity to create awareness and a dialogue in the most compelling way. And it's great TV, by the way.
Were you, you said you were nervous, but when you've probably gotten more comfortable with it. When you're confronting these people, when you're exposing them, do you feel like something could happen? Do you feel bad for them? Do you feel ashamed for them? Like what's going through your mind?
I feel bad for their families. I feel bad for their significant others. I feel bad for their children. And sometimes I experience some empathy for them. But at the end of the day, if we weren't there,
right,
and a child was there, there would be the commission of a rape. And if we catch the guy, and almost universally they say, well, this is their first time, or we were just there to, save the kid or whatever, I can predict without fear of contradiction. They've done this before. Many have done it before. Now, maybe we've caught a couple first-time guys, but very few. And when you talk to therapists and people who study this in law enforcement, these guys are out there.
So when you would do the show, would they get arrested?
In the first 2 investigations, no.
With the one in Long Island?
In Long Island,
Long Island's already got so many things going against it. The fact that you had to like just add insult to injury and remind everybody that To Catch a Predator started in Long Island and 17 people showed up in the right. It is just, shout out to Long Island. But go ahead.
So the firefighter was prosecuted by the FBI. Other than that, these guys were in the wind because we didn't collaborate with law enforcement on the front end. It became very difficult. Now, the second one in suburban Washington, D.C., law enforcement did go after these cases after the fact. There was the rabbi who got busted.
Right.
There was an Army guy who got busted. Several others who were prosecuted and did time in that case. But it became very clear that, we couldn't let these guys just walk out and be in the wind. We had to do something different in order to be socially responsible. And it was very unfulfilling from a pure television production standpoint to see these guys walk off and, twirling an umbrella into the sunset.
Did you ever have anybody that it got, like, obviously there's security with you that we don't see on camera, but was there any situations that maybe got cut out, or maybe that you need to remind yourself where like they want to fight or they want to run away, and maybe you bring in, like, it becomes a collab, it becomes To Catch a Predator with Chris Hansen, and maybe we get Dog the Bounty Hunter going after them.
Well, in one of the recent investigations that's up now on True Blue, we had a guy walk in who got snotty with me right away, and he tried to bolt, and when they bolt, the law enforcement gets him. Now, sometimes I get another shot at the apple if I can figure out a way to get in there, even though they've been taken into custody, which was the case here. And the guy was just really, really arrogant. And you can't do this. You can't put me on television. And I'm, holding a vial of lubricant that he brought with him to, have anal sex with a 15-year-old boy in his face. So I'm not going to back down. And he's acting like he did nothing wrong. They haul him away. And I turned to the crew and I said, I'll bet you money. I will guarantee you that this guy is in a position of authority. He's either a cop, he's a city councilman, he's an executive of the company. And sure enough, the Genesee County Sheriff's Department in Michigan searches his car. They find 3 guns, handcuffs, and his police credentials. He was a police officer, and he had been a school administrator, and he had been a juvenile probation officer. So what do you think was going on there?
Has doing To Catch a Predator and all the stuff you've done in the crime world changed your outlook on humanity?
I'd like to think, Michael, that I keep a pretty good sense of being a regular guy about it. I mean, I don't wake up every morning and think, okay, this guy in the subway is going to be this guy or that guy. I try not to put people into categories or look at the whole world as dirty. I mean, I've done a pretty good job, I think, and my family would be a better judge of this, but I've done a pretty good job, I think, of compartmentalizing it and being that guy when I've got to be that guy, and being the guy who shucks oysters on New Year's Eve when it's time to shuck the oysters and turn it off.
Did you shuck oysters?
I did. I was a master shucker.
Okay. So you're a master shucker.
I don't know about that. I was that night. I didn't cut myself. I had a new kit and everything.
Like, how many oysters did we crack open?
I cracked open probably.
Where was this?
We have a home in Michigan. We have an apartment in the city. And
okay.
We have a home in Michigan.
Okay.
And so
are we on a lake? Are we on a beach? Like,
we're across the street from a lake.
Across the street
from Detroit, but
suburban
more in
Detroit.
the country.
Okay.
Yeah.
So crime pays.
Crime pays. It's fine.
You run in a network. So how many oysters did we shuck on New Year's Eve? Like,
we were close to 2 dozen. I went
to 2 dozen. Just two. Well, who's eating like 2 dozens from one person?
My wife ate some.
I mean, that's 2 dozen. I would have had.
Not everybody in the family was eating. There was only 4 of us there. People are spread out. My kids are older, so I've got a kid in Florida. I got one in Brooklyn. We got one in Chicago. We got one at Michigan State still. So we only had 4 of us there. So one doesn't eat oysters. So I was saying, I set out to buy 3 dozen. The way they had it at the store is at Papa Joe's. Shout out to Papa Joe's.
Shout out to Papa Joe's.
Great store. And I went in there thinking, they must have good oysters here. They got everything else is good. And they actually had bushels of oysters out in front of the seafood counter where you could grab them. They give you a plastic glove and you have a bag and you fill up the oysters. And I handed him however many. He said, if you get 4 more, you get 5 extra free. So maybe 30.
Okay.
There were none left.
Okay.
They're all good.
Good. As there should never be oysters left. Again, because you have this lane of crime shows, crime podcast, and To Catch a Predator, the show. Do you have opinions on sex crimes? What is your opinions? I know each state is different, but do you think they're harsh enough? What is your take on it? Because you must understand it differently because there's certain, you have an agenda. You're like, you see it so closely in a different, you're almost as close as, in a weird way, closer than being a cop. Because
you to me.
It's specific. This is a specific thing.
Well,
what is your take on the laws?
They vary state to state. In Georgia, they're very good.
Georgia's the hardest?
Georgia is among the hardest. And we did a sting down there years ago, and these guys went away. I mean, there's no playing down there. In California, the first one we did, it was viewed by that particular judge as a TV reality show sting, so a lot of the guys got slaps on the wrist. Later, they enacted much stricter laws because we did 2 more investigations in California, and the guys did time. But they have grown stricter. Years ago, I testified in front of Congress about all this and the solutions to it and what do you do. And I think we want, in American society, a one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
Lock them up, do whatever you're going to do, find the treatment program that works or, monitor them forever. And the truth of the matter is that these guys aren't all one guy. And I'm not a therapist, I'm not a cop, but I've come face to face with 500 or so of them. And I think they break down into 3 categories. There's the hardcore heavy hitter who'd be doing this with or without the internet. This is the guy who's at the food court at the mall, the bad, Cub Scout leader, the bad Little League coach, who's looking for opportunities every minute of the day. Then there's a young, socially inept offender who's early 20s, who says stuff online they wouldn't say face to face. And they figure, well, if she's 13 or 14 now, if this works out in a couple of years, she'll be older, it'll be okay. They view it as a Romeo-Juliet situation.
Uh-huh.
And these guys, they can probably be treated, monitored, and wrapped on the nose and never offend again.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's this interesting middle category. This is where you find the doctor, the cop, the rabbi, the military officer. These guys have a urge or a predilection to have sex with somebody who's underage, a boy or a girl, but they wouldn't act on it without the internet. And again, you have this anonymity, this access, this addictive quality, and at some point, these guys cross the line between fantasy and reality, and they're knocking on our door. And these guys are the most complicated in terms of treatment. Some will be in so much trouble that they'll be ashamed that, they'll just live a life of quiet shame and horror. Some will reoffend. Some will go straight and, open up a business, and I'll call them to say, do you want to go on my podcast or do you want to, talk about this? I'll say, no, there's no benefit for me in this. I just live in my life. Some are very angry. I mean, I get threats all the time,
from the people that,
from some of these guys.
You've caught people that are second-time offenders on your shows?
We have. So it doesn't happen a lot, but we had one guy show up in Riverside,
California.
The first sting we did in collaboration with law enforcement, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. And we had so many guys in that particular sting. We had 51 guys in 3 days, which was a shocking number, and we could barely keep up with it.
God.
Walks in, and he's got a scar on the side of his head, and he's slow, And he was in the show, but he didn't have a leading role because, it didn't really go anywhere from a storytelling perspective. Several weeks later, we're in Long Beach, California, and the same guy, Michael Seibert, still remember his name, shows up in the chat, and he wants to meet the girl and says, I can't come on Friday because I've got a court date. I can go on Saturday. The court date was from the Riverside bust.
Wow.
So in the meantime, we do a background search, and we find out that he had done a year in jail for a violent assault.
How can
So this
somebody
time he's making the movie.
a violent assault on a kid or violent assault?
Just a violent assault and some adult on fight.
No. I'm being serious about this because I think it's an important question, and I know it's kind of Listen, I know you're a straight news guy. Is what they say about child predators in jail true? Like, are they treated as the bottom of the bottom? And do you know about like certain people that that have been arrested, that put in jail, that have gotten the treatment that everyone sort of hopes that you hear about these myths, you don't know if it's true, not true, but everybody sort of, says when they have any true knowledge revealed, they go, they're the bottom of the bottom. Child offenders and rapists. Is that real?
I think generally that's true. And I can tell you this, one of the guys arrested in the suburban Washington, D.C. case investigation, who was prosecuted by the FBI, so he was doing federal time. So there one night he got 5.5 years, almost 6 years. They're in the prison TV room, federal corrections facility, and they're watching Predator reruns. And his segment comes up, and they're looking, and they figure out that guy is that guy. And he had a rougher go from then on.
Do you know how rough?
I don't know how rough.
But you heard it was rougher.
I heard from very reliable law enforcement sources that it was rough.
Why are there not, or maybe there are, but it's just on the show, female predators, sexual predators?
We've never had one in any of our investigations.
Never.
Never. We had one where a guy said, "I'm bringing my girlfriend or wife along." We think that was a ruse to, con the decoy posing as an underage girl into doing what he wanted her to do. The therapists tell us that it's because when you talk about female predators, you're more likely to see the teacher-student scenario. The female predator doesn't get off on the anonymity the way the male predator does.
Right.
And so it's happened, and I'm aware of cases. We've never seen one in 18 years of doing these stand-ups.
You just never had it on your show,
never had it on
your stuff.
I don't think it's anywhere close to being like the male on female or male on male predators.
Now, I would be remiss, I don't know if that's the right word, if I didn't tell you. The I Am Rapaport Stereo Podcast has a award-winning segment. Okay, Chris, it's called the Sick Fuck of the Week, which is inspired by...
I've got about 500 of them for you.
Yes. And I just wanted to let you know, like, one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you is because what I should have done is pull some sick fucks and the Sick Fuck of the Week segment on the I Am Rapaport Stereo Podcast. It's a certain somebody with a certain je ne sais quoi. So I stay away from anything that's too violent. Like I like... Well, I don't want to say I'd say we, the think tank at the I Am Rapaport Stereo Podcast, there's a certain amount of animal what is the word with the animals bestiality.
I've got your Sick Fuck of the Week.
You got a Sick Fuck of the Week?
I've got a Sick Fuck of the Week.
Please.
We're in Washington.
This is great.
We're in Herndon, Virginia.
Wait, let me bring this in.
Washington.
Single. This is an I Am Rapaport Stereo Podcast exclusive. I have Chris Hansen bringing you the Sick Fuck of the Week.
We had a guy in our suburban Washington, D.C. investigation who had chatted for days and days with somebody he thought was a young teenage girl, wanting her to involve her dog in the sex act. Very specific and precise requests involving her having sex with the dog and then him having sex with her afterwards. Now, he walks in, and I've got the transcripts. He's a military guy, military intelligence officer. Walks in, and the first thing he says is, and you can hear him mutter it, the mic picks it up, "Where's the dog?" So he comes in, and I lay into him with the transcripts. And, there's talk of a dog, there's talk of the girl having sex with the dog, there's talk of you using that in a way so you can have sex with the girl because she's a virgin. And he, I got a problem, I've got issues, I got to figure it out. And boom, he goes away for 4 years. Now I find him and I reach out for the podcast. And he basically says, don't ever call me again. Fair enough. His significant other, he was married, the wife died, and he's dating this other woman, calls me and says, this gets weird. I'm a bit of a fan, and I think it'd be good for him to do the interview. So we go through this for months of back and forth, and he lays into me, you ruined my life, blah, 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 da, da, da. I said, Joe, let us review the facts of the case. You wanted a girl to have sex with a dog so that she would be lubricated so you could take her human virginity, right? So you're going to be mad at me? You did this. And what would have happened if I wasn't there with my crew and you found a girl? And this guy, it wasn't his first rodeo, right? So he ultimately says he'll do the interview. Then they go radio silent. And we went to this particular part of the country looking for them because I thought I could find them and talk them into it. And they were nowhere to be found. And so who knows? And now they've changed numbers and they're not in touch anymore. So my current opinion is they probably won't do it. But I would like to, as much as he is the sick fuck of the week.
Oh,
clearly, I would still like to sit down and interview him and figure out, where have you fixed yourself? How did you fix yourself? He was in intensive therapy. He did, I think, 4 years in prison, and it was federal time because he got convicted by a military tribunal because he was in one of the early investigations where police were not involved in the actual sting.
Oh, man, that's disturbing.
But the federal government took it so seriously, the military took it so seriously, the Army, that they put out a press release saying, we referred this case to the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Right.
And they successfully prosecuted, and he did serious time.
Wow. That's a true blue sick fuck of the week, and that's what we do at the I Am Rapaport Stereo Podcast, man. It
was glad to be helpful.
Yeah. Okay. So you started a network, an actual television streaming network, true blue streaming network. How did you start a network, and tell me about the network?
So the network focuses, as you would imagine by the name, on crime reporting, crime documentaries. We also have a big selection of documentaries done by other people. If you go to it, it looks like Netflix for crime. But it's a partnership with a fellow named Sean Reck, who owns Transition Studio. And Sean had done Murder in the Park and done the White Boy documentary. And I had about White Boy Rick, Richard Worshey Jr. And I had broken that story a million years ago as a reporter in Detroit.
You broke it because you were from Detroit, and you knew.
I was a reporter at Channel 7 Action News
in
Detroit. So he reaches out many years later and says, look, I'm doing this documentary. Can I interview you? I said, yeah, absolutely. So 5 or 6 years ago, we do this interview. And the documentary ends up being a big deal. So
right.
It gets a lot of attention. And he circles back around and says, look, I have this idea for a crime streaming network. I've done it already with American Gospel TV, which is the most successful streaming network you've never heard of. He had a producer who did a documentary called American Gospel about questionable practices in the gospel world, in the Christian church.
Mm-hmm.
And it was more or less as something to reward him for all the crime reporting this producer had done. Sean funded it. It becomes a huge grassroots hit. And then that producer comes back to him and says, I want to do a streaming network. I think this would be big. He says, all right, I'll do it. Huge. So Sean had already done this. He had the template down in a, smaller version for American Gospel TV, which remains hugely popular, but very selectively targeted. And so when he approached me on this, it was a no-brainer. I mean, this is to control the content, to control the distribution of the content, to own the content, and to avoid the bureaucracy of large networks. And Michael, the last 2 big projects I did for Discovery Plus, love the people at Discovery, have done a ton of work at Discovery. Love, love, love them. But one was 12 months from pitch to air, which was lightning fast. For
right.
them. And the other was almost 2 years, the Peter Nygaard investigation in Onision in real life. It takes forever. There's A meetings and B meetings and C meetings and green light meetings. And now I call Sean and say, I need a crew on Thursday. I'll give you an example. We have this documentary show series coming out called The Facebook Fiend. This guy was on social media targeting young women, creating relationships, stealing money, and in many cases, physically and sexually assaulting them. These young women got together and they came to me, directly to me, and said, this guy's out there, he's a bad guy. I do all the interviews. Now, again, there's no writing pitches. I call Sean and tell him what it is. We have the people come into the studio. We interview all the people. We figure out which law enforcement agencies should be prosecuting this. This one agency in Washington State makes a case. They get a warrant. We find out this guy is staying up with somebody in Queens and working in Brooklyn. Well, guess what happened this morning at 7 a.m.? The U.S. Marshals went in, grabbed his ass, and took him to the NYPD, where he will go through a hearing as we speak and will be taken back, extradited to Washington State to face charges in this case. This is from late summer, fall to January 3rd. Because
as you know, and reading the subtext of what you're saying, dealing with networks and network executives and researchers and development, it's a pain in the.
It is, and I understand.
Especially something that you do, that you understand, that you sort of crafted and created on your own. It's not rocket science in terms of the way it's presented.
It's not. It's 40 years of knowing who to call and what to do and being able to expedite this. It's the best of all worlds. It's the best of local news, where you get a tip at 4 p.m. and it's the lead at 6, and the best of the network shows where millions of people have access to it. And you know, I presented this first at CrimeCon in Las Vegas this summer, and the people in the audience, we had a clip of the Facebook Fiend and we had a clip of the new Predator series, and the people got it. 5,000 people got it instantly.
What else do you want to do at the network? Like, is there a sort of Godfather? Is there a sort of opus that you want to do at the network? In your head, like, what would be your dream thing in terms of telling stories at True Blue streaming network?
Well, we're doing it now. I think the ultimate goal will be able to throw a switch and go live. For instance, the Idaho accused murderer.
Talk about that one.
Well, that's a fascinating case. So, as you know, there was an arrest in Pennsylvania the other day, and he was connected to the killings of the 4 students at Idaho. And the case has fascinated the world, really. And there was this feeling that maybe the Moscow, Idaho PD wasn't up to the task and was late getting the FBI. Well, none of that is true. They did a great job, and they did everything they were supposed to do, and they held things close to the vest. And guess what? It looks like they cracked the case.
Right.
And good on them, because I don't see anything that they did except good, solid police work. And I've followed these cases for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want to do is get True Blue to the point where we can flip a switch, and, you know, when the Moscow police does their news conference, it's on all our platforms. When this guy is in court, it can be on all our platforms. And then we have the people, not just me, but other people in the group to talk about and comment on it. So we have that, and we have the news magazine, True Crime Nation, which is within True Blue, which I want to see, you know, turn into a weekly event where we break news and people quote us, and we're well on our way to get there. But it's a great way. Look, at the end of the day, the same enterprising techniques that we applied to producing and reporting Predator, we're just taking enterprising techniques and applying them to the distribution of this very unique branded content that we have. And nobody else can really do it. I mean, people are. I mean, look, Dan Abrams is doing it with Law and Crime. He's doing a great job over there. But he figured it out.
Right.
I've figured it out.
Right.
Other people are figuring out in their own niches. Like, that's more, you know, courtroom stuff. But they do a lot of other great work as well. But, you know, there's some collab going on there. I mean, he and I know each other. He knows where it's going. I know where it's going.
Did you hear about this case? I'm sure you did, which I'm sure is going to be discussed more. It was over the holidays. An attractive 22-year-old girl from Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. Her last name was Secondino. I just remembered it because I was like, some Italian names, I'm like Secondino. She confessed to killing her father with a
Oh
knife.
yeah.
And she was like, it looks like almost like an Instagram girl, like a cute 22-year-old girl. This seems like a case that's going to turn into something.
We're looking at that right now. This is the case where the father or the uncle, whoever it was selling pictures or had pictures stored. Is that the same?
Oh, is
case?
that?
I don't know. I've got to look into it, and I don't want to speak before knowing, completely about the case. But I think there was another, there was a motive there, and a couple of cases like that floating around right now. And the other thing that we're producing a huge project on is this sextortion.
Talk about that.
Kids who get tricked many times by internet scam artists half a world away in Western Africa into transmitting, essentially pornographic pictures of themselves. And there's a case outside of Cleveland, 17-year-old track star, grade student, who has what he thinks is a girl send him some video. He sends video back. This is on Instagram, by the way. This isn't in some weird dark web trading, bazaar. This is on Instagram. And then this sex extortionist says, give me $100, send me gift cards, do all this, do all that. And the kid kills himself in his parents' home. So now the parents have to celebrate Christmas. This happened right before Christmas without their son. And the word that they're trying to get out, and what we're going to show in this series we're doing, is that these kids have to, so what if somebody's got a picture of you?
Right.
What are they really going to do with it?
Right.
How are they going to harm a 17-year-old kid? They're going to send it to grandma?
Right.
What's grandma going to know about
Right.
it? Just tell your parents what's happened and go to the police.
Right.
Now, the odds of catching somebody in an internet cafe in Lagos or Benin or Cote d'Ivoire are very remote. But the danger that it realistically poses to a child in terms of somebody tricking you into showing a picture of yourself of a sexually charged nature, that danger is remote too. And we have to get the message out to kids and parents to say, hey, look, everybody F's up. But when you and I were growing up,
right,
the worst thing you had was, sneaking into, Mr. West's garage and grabbing his Playboys out of the secret box by the Chevelle.
These cameras and social media are
a whole different world. And they're good at, these con artists are good at exploiting an adolescent's mind and hepping them up and making them feel that, God, I got to act now. Or then when they run out of money, what kid's got more than $100?
So is this a specific show called Sextortion?
I don't know what it's going to be called, but it'll be on True Blue, and we're producing a major project that will talk about all this, investigate it, and we're going to take it as far as we can. We've got some cases on the West Coast where we know who was behind them. We're going to expose those people, and we're not only going to do it for True Blue, but we're going to produce something that schools can use around the country.
Because isn't it illegal, essentially, if you're underage, if you send a picture of yourself, even to a friend, like a boyfriend, girlfriend, that's sexually of sexual nature, isn't that become you forget getting extorted?
The transmission of child pornography is illegal. So even if you're
sending it to another child,
it's illegal.
Oh shit! Kids need to know about that.
They do, and it happens in school districts
terrible.
across the country. Where
and they could get in trouble for doing that amongst friends.
They can.
Wow. You have your podcast. You sit down. I'm also. We talked about this briefly. When you sit down with the Predators later on the podcast, Predators I Have Caught with Chris Hansen. Like you mentioned it a little earlier, but what is essentially your agenda? Like, what is your thought process of what are you trying to get out?
What I try to do is immerse myself in the video, in the chat logs. We try to find as much out about that person. We try to get them to sit down and talk to us, which we've not been able to do yet, but a number of cases are close. And we tell that story. I tell it in my own voice. I don't write a script. It's a total immersion experience. And then I just tell the story, with anecdotes that I've not shared before. And then we get into where the guy is, what he's done. I've been able to get a couple snippets of audio recorded with them, and those are interesting to people who follow this. I mean, there's a whole community called the TCAP community, which is the acronym for To Catch a Predator. and they follow this stuff very closely, and they report occasionally to me about one thing or another. There are subreddits about this.
Right.
People watch these characters very closely. There's one in particular. His name is Lorne Armstrong, who surfaced in an investigation we had in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and this guy has become iconic. I mean, they call it because he said "Oh cod," when he was getting arrested. When I confronted him, CAWD. There's a Church of Cod that they call it. He lives up in Maine. He's out, and we've been back and forth trying to negotiate a way to do an interview, and he's got some cockamamie, conditions he wants met, and hopefully he'll drop those and we'll be able to do the interview. But it'll be a major event,
right,
for these people who follow this.
Do you watch these other documentaries? Another fantastic I Am Rapaport Stereo podcast episode of 2022. We did our 20 sickest fucking documentaries of all time, and that was just the first 20.
Yeah.
But like, Don't Fuck with Cats,
yeah,
and all these, like, are you able to watch them, or is that sort of like, like that's kind of like you do enough of this in your own?
I watch them, and because I like to see what other content creators are doing and how they put it together. Some of them, like Making a Murder, serious questions raised about that. In fact, Sean Reck, Transition Studio, my partner in True Blue, has the flip side of that in a major documentary that's going to be coming out very soon that shows what really went on in that first documentary and how skewed it was and what the point of view was and how they messed with the facts. And those producers go back and put that together, and it's really eye-opening.
What about The Staircase? Did you watch that?
I did.
Who do you think killed it? What do you think was the eagle? Do you think the guy did it? I can't remember his name.
I know who you're talking about. It's been a while since I've seen it.
We don't need his name.
Yeah.
But then there was like crazy theories.
I have a lot of questions about that case, and I need to take a closer look at it before I make any pronouncements on it. But it was fascinating material.
Crazy.
But it and it set a template in a lot of ways for a lot of other documentaries because of when they did it and how they did it.
And it was it was like, I remember it was 12 hours or 10 hours at first, or it was 8 hours, and then they did 10 more hours. I mean, this was like, talk about a Godfather apocalypse now.
Right, but it was all everybody was talking about in my business for a long time. I mean, it set the standard in many ways for some of these documentaries.
Yeah, I agree. Now you're also doing a one-man show,
which I'm.
What the hell is this?
Excited. So, I was approached. The same fellows who produced my podcast had a relationship with the South Point Casino in Las Vegas, which is off the strip, but they do a lot of amazing shows. They have all the rodeos there, the major equestrian facility. It's a very nice, clean casino. They've got great restaurants. They do the pro bowling tour. They have NASCAR team. And I was approached to do a multimedia one-man show called Have a Seat with Chris Hansen. And so we're going to be out there February 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And we're putting the finishing details on the show. And it will take people inside these predator cases. And there's big video screens. And we've got material that's never been shown before. And it's going to be highly polished, highly produced. And I think the goal would be to, we'll see how it goes in Vegas. I'm excited about it. It's something totally out of my comfort zone. But it's interesting. If you had asked me 20 years ago, would I ever do a show in Vegas? I said, well, no, I'll talk to the homicide convention in Vegas. I've done stories. We did a series for Dateline called Vegas Undercover. I'd done that, but I never in a million years imagined that I would do a one-man show. Having said that, I'm very excited about it. I think it in your business, your side of the business, that you get a role and it pushes you to think and be creative and to maybe work without a net once in a while. And it makes you better in every other aspect of what we do. And it's become a multimedia world.
100%.
It's not just, at least I think at my phase of the game, having been in it 40 years, it's not just one job anymore. It's the podcast, it's the network, it's the show within the network, it's being on the phone, it's putting these projects together, and they're long days, but they're very rewarding days, and that's where I'm at in the career. I've got my kids are grown,
right?
So I have this time and this energy, and why not spend it. You know,
I agree.
Why not have some fun with it?
I
And
agree.
try to show people a world they wouldn't normally see.
Do you, because you started off as a news person, what is your take on the news? On local news, on cable news, on Fox News, CNN, fake news, real news. There's so many resources. There's podcasts, there's YouTube, there's Substack, there's all sorts of stuff. Like, what is your sort of point of view on the news? Do you believe these guys?
Oh, I do.
Where
look,
do you get your news from?
I get my news from everything from the New York Times to the New York Post to the Washington Post. They have the top 7 that comes out every day that I find is a good read. I have a few, alternative sources. I gather the news myself, but I still believe in local news. I think local news is important, both newspapers and television. My second son, my second oldest, is a reporter for the Fox station in Orlando. He's out there gutting it out every night, and he cares. He cares whether it's a Florida man story or somebody wrestling a bear out of their kitchen, or whether it's a major story about the former president of Brazil hiding out in Orlando. He cares.
Mm-hmm.
And the other young people working at that station care very deeply about it. I mean, there's a television aspect to it. Yes, everybody's trying to get to the next highest market and maybe to the network, but he cares. And I think most people in local news truly, truly care. They're out there in the streets trying to tell you what the hell is going on in your community. And I think of the newspapers. Now, you take it to the next level in cable news, that's a whole different shooting match. I mean, you have people exploiting the divisions in society to get ratings. Now, everybody is allowed a point of view, right?
Yeah.
The editorial page in the Detroit News growing up was different than the Free Press. One was lefty, one was righty. We knew that. But you read both and you came up with your own opinion. I pride myself in the fact that my conservative friends think I'm a wild-eyed liberal and my liberal friends think I'm too far. Nobody really knows.
Right.
And I keep it that way.
Right.
And my kids were raised that way. But we're not going to go buy into flying some flag, in front of the house because that's the flavor of the day.
Right.
You think it through before you buy into any bullshit.
I got you. And before I let you go, I've heard that you have fitness goals. You're about getting in shape. Walk me through the routine.
Well,
Walk me through where Chris Hansen goes to get those fucking gains.
I, about a year and a half ago, started going to a trainer just blocks from this studio.
Okay.
Named Robert Brace, who's got a whole philosophy.
Shout out to Robert Brace.
He's great. He's great. This guy was a ballet dancer, British guy. Then he was a pastor in Harlem, and then he got into this in a big way. And he teaches and embraces a very specifically tailored physical fitness program for individuals. And a lot of guys, in the media and in entertainment and women too go there. And he's just got me on a very centered program. I've been, I've always been athletic, but it was more of a, get on the Peloton bike, make sure I get my steps in, but I wasn't doing weights and I wasn't boxing and doing
Walk me through the routine. Don't be humble. Walk me through what's going on in the gym there.
What goes on in the gym, I get there, I hit the treadmill, depending on.
Well, you're like on an 8, 7, like we go speed running.
I do 6 miles an hour for 6 minutes or 5 for 5.
Okay.
If there depends on how rough they want to treat me that day.
Okay.
And then get off. I'll do some boxing.
Okay.
And they've got me
southpaw or are you conventional stance? Okay, right-handed. Okay.
And I grew up in the Detroit area, so we all knew how to fight. But
shout out to Tommy Hearns, Kronk Gym.
Yeah.
Okay,
Kronk
go
Gym,
ahead.
Exactly.
Walk me through it.
And then they'll go some more cardio, then to weights.
Shit.
So do that. It's an hour. It's a full hour.
Right.
And then stretching. And at my age,
yes,
stretching has become so important. My stepdaughter got a new puppy, and the puppy, of course, within 2 weeks fractured its right rear leg and has a cast on. He's great. He's getting around, but he's a great dog. But, you bend over to grab the dog because I was taking him for a walk, and you feel your back because you hadn't stretched that day. Well, today we worked on a lot of stretching. The back feels great.
Got to keep those hips lubed.
You gotta keep the
hips lubed.
You got to keep them all moving. And then the other thing that I do, if I'm in the city especially, is I'll get 13 to 20,000 steps in a day, and to keep moving and watch the diet. I was a pig over Christmas and eating desserts. And,
I was a dog.
I mean, just
It was disgusting one night I had at Christmas. Disgusting.
You don't even want to know. But
what'd you do?
Well, we have
besides the shucking and the clam. What'd you do?
The oysters are not a problem. That's just pure protein. But we had the crab legs. And then I go on to this bakery and gotten all the different desserts.
Like what? Chocolate, key lime. What are we talking about?
Everything. So
strawberry shortcake.
So you can get every kind imaginable. So cheesecake and
cheese.
Key lime pie, chocolate flourless cakes, and all the little ones.
Brutal.
But the
chocolate
killer,
cookies too.
Oh yeah, we had cookies. You had all that. Yeah. But the killer is we get these pizzas from Chicago, these Lou Malnati's, the deep dish, and they send them to the house on dry ice. You put them in the freezer and you put them in the oven for 45 minutes. And they come out just like you're at the restaurant. So but they're the deep dish.
Yeah,
the cheese and the sausage, and they have one that is. The Chicago Italian beef with jalapenos in it.
Yeah.
Oh.
So this all happened over the break.
All happening. I'm off it now, but.
Well, we all say we're off it now. Now, single here. Now, I asked Chris Hansen the hard-hitting questions. He asks his people the hard-hitting question. The hardest-hitting question, and I'm looking right into the camera. You box, you stretch, you do the weights, you're on the treadmill. Chris Hansen, do you plank?
I can plank.
What are we talking about? Because I'm not bragging. I'm not bragging. But you probably already heard about this already. 6 minutes, Chris.
That's good.
And if you ever asked me,
that's impressive.
Do you think I could do a 6 minute plank? Before I did a 6 minute plank, I would say,
well, you're
hell
obviously
no.
Fit,
You say I'm obviously fit because you see it, right?
Right.
You just see it. It's like there. I'm even in this thick cashmere sweater, you see sort of like everything.
It's a glow. It's an aura.
6 minute plank.
That's impressive. I don't know that I've ever done a 6.
You can do it.
I probably could get there. I usually, as a part of the training routine, I'll do a 1 minute at the end after a course.
No, we got to do more.
We got to do more.
Because you know why? The thing about planking is that it's mental.
Oh, it's mental.
And if I could fucking do it, you could fucking do it. And I wanted to, because you're a businessman. I'm thinking about doing my own fitness. And the fitness motto is going to be, if I could fucking do it.
Oh, yeah, you can fucking do it. Well, it's true. I mean, if you had asked me at the beginning of starting with Robert Braze, if I could do all the stuff I was doing, again, I skier, I play tennis, and I run and get steps in and all that stuff. But, the stuff that he's got me doing is way above my normal, what I thought my tolerances would be.
Yeah.
And it's and I enjoy it. Everybody wakes up and, it's like, I got other stuff to do. And then you get through that workout, it's like, wow, I feel really good about myself.
It helps.
And now I can go, slay the rest of the day.
I agree.
Especially traveling. I mean, you probably travel a fair bit. And
a lot.
You got to be fit to travel. You got to get your mind right.
Yep.
And, just get through it.
Chris Hansen, True Blue Streaming Network. Where do we find the True Blue Streaming Network?
You can get all the information you need at watchtrueblue.com. But there's an app. It's on Roku. It's on all the platforms. But if you go to watchtrueblue.com, TRUBLU, it'll lay it all out for you.
The podcast, True Crime Nation.
That's the news magazine on the network.
And the podcast is Predators
I've Caught
with Chris Hansen. And then the one-man show in Vegas, which
Have a Seat with Chris Hansen live.
That's going to be fun.
I think so. I'm excited. We're going to go back out there in 2 weeks to rehearse, but I think it'll be good.
I wish you all the best with all the
Michael,
things.
thank you so much.
I appreciate you taking the time to come. This was fun. Like everybody's a fan. Last question. People see you on the street. I mean, you have an unusual fame because you're not just a news person. You have this pop culture fame. When people see you on the street, people ask me this all the time, but it's a little different with you. What do people say? People scream at you, "Fuck those Predators," or what?
Sometimes go get them. Sometimes, you look just like Chris Hansen. I said, I get that all the time. He goes, you sound like him. Like I said, that's just the way he talks. He says, well, I'm that guy. He goes, no,
right?
Yeah, I'm really like, no way.
Anyway, I wish you luck with the network. That ain't an easy task.
No, but it's
going to happen.
It's good. It's all clicking.
Crime pays.
Crime pays.
I appreciate it. Happy New Year. Good luck with everything.
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you so much for the sick fuck of the week, man. That was a big surprise.
I had that in my back pocket.
That was a big surprise. I am Rapaport Stereo Podcast. I'm out. Chris Hansen, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Done. That was great.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. It's
Oh, man,
great
that
to
was
work with a pro.
really, really
No,
good.
it was awesome. You're great.